like to welcome to today's guest on the DFREE Wealth Lab podcast, Jennifer Jones Alston. Ms. Jones has been advising the new mayor of New York on his economic policies. She's the daughter of one of my mentors and preaching heroes, Reverend Dr. William Augustus Jones, who for years served as the pastor of the Bethany Baptist Church in Brooklyn, and I'm honored to have her as a friend. She helps us as we think about the DFREE movement and the public policies that are critical and relevant for financial freedom and economic justice. And so I'm sure you'll be inspired and informed by this great thought leader around economic issues. All right, folks, I'm here today with one of the most important people I know, whose father was a pastor, preacher, activist that made an indelible impression on my life as a preacher, as a leader, as a person, William Augustus Jones. And so I can't tell you how honored I am to just have this conversation with you, Jennifer Jones Alston.
That's right. Well, it's an honor to be here, and you're just reminding me of like how Dad moved through the world and tried to be an example for others, and then now you're kind of paying it forward and giving it back to me. It means the world to me.
Yeah, and then the bonus from the Jones family was your uncle was my lawyer. So I've got Clayton Jones and Bill Jones in my legacy framework, and I just thank God for you.
And can I tell you that my uncle Clayton, was the reason why I went to law school.
I can imagine.
I was a chemistry major in college.
Oh.
And when I got out of college, or I should say the year before I graduated from college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Realized I didn't want to be a chemist, didn't want to go to med school, and I was trying to figure it out. One day I asked Uncle Clayton what I should do, and he said, go to law school. And he said, and while you're there, you'll figure it out. And then he said, and if you don't, that's okay, because people think that lawyers can do anything short of practicing medicine.
That's great. That's great. So when your name is called, Jennifer Jones Alston, there are two words that accompany that. It's faith and justice. So what do you actually do?
So first and foremost, I tell people all the time, I am a child of God.
Right.
And people sometimes say I'm a faith leader, and I say, no, I'm a leader of faith. And I lean very, very, very hard, very deeply into the scriptures that teach and preach us that we are to be justice warriors, that teach and have helped us appreciate that Jesus was a justice warrior. Or as my dad would say, God is a revolutionary.
That's right.
Right? And so when you're guided by that, but you have a career that is law and policy, and you feel that God has called you to work on behalf of God's most vulnerable children, what that then shows up looking like is you cannot accept that charity work is enough. You cannot accept that if we just make sure that people have enough food for the day.
Right.
Right? Or if they're just clothed in the moment. While the scriptures teach us that we are to care for the least of these, and we are to make sure that people go clothed, that they are not going hungry. God is a revolutionary. Jesus is a revolutionary. We have to be justice warriors. So what that looks like for me in my daily walk, my daily talk, is centering on the laws, the policies, the systems that uphold, as I term it, structural economic deprivation.
Yeah, I didn't understand the what or the why, but I was growing up in a suburb in Jersey, and we lived in the southern part of town, which was a colored part of town. And our park was never kept. The grass was never watered. The basketball courts were always in disrepair. And when we would go to the other parts of town, we saw just beautiful parks and swimming pools and tennis courts. And I didn't understand then that those conditions were sustained by systems,
That's right.
by policies,
That's right.
by budget priorities. And when I learned that, I gained an appreciation for the kind of people that do what you do, because to your point, you're not just focused on helping people get by today.
That's right.
But changing systems. And God, through Christ, was a revolutionary because Jesus came to upset the old system.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
You may recall that God in the Ghetto, a book that my father
Your
wrote
father.
back in 1979, centers on the system of capitalism, militarism, and racism, all working to continually oppress people of color.
Right.
Dad wrote in that book that, essentially we have to understand that racism is the most effective tool for upholding unjust ways,
Right.
ways of advancing capitalism in unjust ways. I edited that book and republished it in 2021.
Right. Congratulations.
Right, and it's
Very
God in the
exciting.
Ghetto, a prophetic word revisited. Going back and looking at it, what it helped me to appreciate, Dad writes in the book about how the ghetto, is a social construct. It doesn't have to be, but the parks that you talk about, that in your childhood, those parks were deprived, the community is deprived of critical resources, first and foremost to create a condition in the mindset of the people who live there that they are less than, that they don't have the capacity for more, that their living conditions are really the consequence of them not being as capable, as smart, as able, when it really comes down to a deprivation of resources in those communities, intentionally to create not only the poverty-stricken neighborhoods, but the mindset that is how you have to live. When you look around and you see many of our communities, not the community that you've created, but when you look at many of the communities, the reason why you created the community you created, they've been deprived of critical resources to create that mindset. So my work is really centered on how do we help people understand that the conditions that persist in low-income communities, many of them communities of color, but also just overall low-income communities, are actually not the result of what low-income people or people who are classified as low-income, what they've created, but rather what systems have created, and then how do you work to address and counter those systems so you can actually create communities that really are thriving.
Yeah, and what I want to talk to you about and actually work with you on is this complementary dynamic of both changing the system and then changing the mentality that the system has created. Because often, it's like the dog by the tree with the leash. You cut the leash and the dog stays by the tree.
Right.
And what I've been trying to work on is helping people resist the temptation to get caught up in economic victimization.
That's right.
Voluntarily.
So years ago, I'm going back better than 25 years ago, I served on a commission that had been gifted some Walter Annenberg Foundation money, $50 million, to look at how we should rebuild schools in New York City. So one of the things that we did, understandably, naturally, we went out and we talked with the community about what they would desire by way of education reform. And what was so disturbing was that these were people who had dilapidated, failed schools, saying to us, well, what's wrong with the schools? They were good enough for me. And it was like they had adopted this mindset that they were the problem and not the schools.
Right.
That that if their children were failing, it was more their children and less them. That mindset of, yes, victimization, but also, well, I got what I deserve.
Right, right.
And we realized that we had to change their minds to appreciate, no, you are smart.
Right.
You are capable. It's just you need good working schools, educators who believe in and want to support your children to learn.
Yeah, and both sets of work have to happen at the same time.
That's right.
Otherwise, you'll change the system, and the people won't take advantage of the change.
That's right.
Or you won't, or the people will awaken to their potential, but the system is just you can't conquer it.
Exactly.
And that's what makes the work so hard, and it's why I appreciate your emphasis on, to quote you, doing the work, because this is not, it's not popular, it's not sexy, it's not subject to press conferences on the front end. You really have to do serious work, research, data collection, analysis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're counting on us not to. So, I'll give you an example of what the work looks like. Going back about, I guess maybe about 5 years ago, New York City, New York State, I should say, I live in New York State, raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
Right.
My organization, it's a social policy and advocacy organization, was concerned about individuals, families, who earn relatively low wages and are eligible for income supports, child care subsidies, housing subsidies, transportation, food assistance, that they might make $15, may go up $1 or $2 an hour, and now no longer be eligible for
Right.
some of those income supports.
Right.
So we went around the state talking with people. We learned that that would be the case for a few, and that they actually didn't want the wages to go up.
Right.
They had sometimes resisted promotions.
Because the wage would go up and their income would go
Right,
down.
and so they'd make more money. They got more money from the income supports
Right.
than they would from $1 or $2 an hour going up.
Right.
But we also learned that there were many people at $20 an hour who still were struggling to make ends meet. And what we realized was that was because their eligibility for critical income supports, the child care, the food and all, are based on the official federal poverty measure. Mm-hmm. The official poverty measure for the federal government says that if you're a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, living anywhere in America, I live in Brooklyn, we're out here in Franklin, if you're in Wichita, Kansas, if you're 2 adults, 2 children, living anywhere in America, $31,800, you're not considered poor.
That's unbelievable.
$31,800.
Yeah.
Now, where in America can any family of 4 live off of $31,800? But here's how this works. The federal minimum wage still today in the 2020s is $7.25 an hour.
Right.
When you annualize $7.25 an hour for somebody working full-time all year, it's $15,000.
Right.
So now if you got 2 adults in the household making federal minimum wage, 15,000 times 2 is 30,000. Woo, look, they're only $1,800,000 shy of being poor. So now the government can come in and say, well, let's just give you a little food support. Let's give you a little bit of cash assistance. Let's give you a little bit of Medicaid perhaps, right? Bring you up maybe to 60, 70,000. But if you're in New York City, the
Right.
Bronx, measures suggest that you need as much as $150,000 just to cover your basic needs.
Right. Average rent in New York is about $4,000 a month.
Exactly. So what's happening is the government, beginning with the federal government, and then the states and the localities following suit, because everybody uses this low-based, outdated poverty measure to determine what is, poverty and what is not, and what people need. Now what they can do is they can suppress wages. They can suppress eligibility for critical income supports, which then means that people who are receiving these supports are now ever dependent on government to meet their basic needs.
Right.
So the government is now essentially structurally depriving people of critical resources to be able to thrive. This is why you can see people working out there trying to get ahead.
Millions
Right?
of them.
Working, doing their best. People going to school. This is why the black woman who is, has been classified as the most educated segment of our society, more college and graduate degrees, why she can go to college, go to grad school, take out significant dollars in debt, be the primary breadwinner in almost 70% of our households, and she still can't make ends meet. Why her children grow up in poverty, 1 in 3 black children growing up in poverty compared to less than 1 in 10 white children. Because she's doing this work, but because of occupation segregation that keeps relegating her on the average to these low-wage jobs. She does all the work to get ahead, but the government has set it up with subpar wages, with high debt from student loans.
Right.
She can't get ahead. So the work we do, you're teaching people how to make the most of the income that they have.
Right.
The work that we do focuses on, okay, but let's still not negate the fact that the government is still holding you in a state of suppression if we don't do the work of countering all of those systems and structures that don't make your income meet your basic
And that's
needs.
where the justice issue comes in. It's one thing to help people navigate the system,
That's
but
right.
you also have to challenge injustice in the system.
That's exactly
Because even
right.
if you overcome the barriers, you still have this context of injustice, and
Right.
it's really you know, as I started out as an activist, I've been a pastor, I've been in government, and I find great delight in helping people take advantage of opportunities, of moving up in life,
And you can.
expanding. However, that's not in the absence of the justice issues
It's
and
a
the
both
justice.
and.
It's both and.
It's a
Yeah.
both and so my work is making sure that when we are helping people to get to that next level with their jobs,
Yeah.
that we are making sure that at the government level, they're not being deprived of critical resources, whatever they may be,
Yeah.
whether it's just wages. I mean, so we have advanced the national true cost of living.
Yeah, I want to
Right?
hear about that.
And that cost of living centers on not just what you need to meet your basic daily needs. The nation centers on acute deprivation. What do you need to pay? You know, essentially the poverty measure that I mentioned a while ago looks at food as the most expensive household cost. That was the case back in the 60s. But as you just talked about, housing is now, in most places, the most expensive household
Right.
cost, followed by healthcare,
Right.
child care, right? And then we get to food and transportation. But the government uses food. They don't use housing. We've created a national true cost of living measure that looks at the costs. And the costs include all of what I just mentioned. But then we add debt. How much does it cost to pay down debt?
Right.
Student debt, medical debt, other sources of debt. It also looks at savings. What should you have to be able to save 10, 20%? And then it goes county by county. So it looks at Somerset County. It looks at Kings County in Brooklyn, New York. It looks at counties across the nation, and it looks at the cost of housing, childcare, and the like in those specific counties. Then it looks at the resources that people have in those counties. Income, earned income, and then income that comes off of assets if you may have them. Income by way
Right.
of critical income supports. And it looks at the gap. And what it tells us is that today in America, 52% of Americans are not what we call economically secure.
Right.
What that means is
Right.
that they may be able to put food on the table.
Right.
But if the car breaks down,
There's no emergency.
they don't
capacity.
have $500 of
Right.
savings to be able to decide between paying to have the car repaired and keeping the food on the table.
And these are people living well above the
This is
minimum
middle
wage.
income people.
Right.
So we're advancing, and this is the policy, the structural work. Rather than allowing this nation to use the federal poverty measure, the official poverty measure, as the standard for wages, as the standard for income supports, who's eligible for Pell Grants. We need an economic security measure that looks at the true costs, and then it gives the people the data to say, oh, no, 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 no. When you're going to set a child care subsidy
Right.
at 100% of poverty or 200%
Right.
of poverty, but really you know that people at $100,000 rather than $31,800 or $64,000, people at $100,000 need a child care subsidy, we've now got the data to say that's not right. We're not going to play this game with the federal government, the state government, or the local government.
So let's talk about government funding and for these various programs, because I haven't really delved into these conversations for years, right? But that's why I wanted to see you. So once we come up with the just priorities, there's got to be some take in order to add some give. I've been watching very carefully this whole discussion about shrinking government and dismantling programs. It's been alarming to me that the Defense Department has not been the focus of much discussion around budget cutting. I mean, we've got the ability to blow up the world a few hundred times, but no one has focused on how we might save money in this super defense buildup that we have and do some of what you're talking about, because it does take finding money.
It takes finding money, but the finding money begins with the desire and the will.
Yeah.
And so I go back to some of my dad's teachings. And Dad, as you know, walked and journeyed with Martin Luther King
Right.
Jr. He was president of
Right.
Operation Breadbasket, which
Right.
was the SCLC Economic Justice Arm. King, my father, I'll add in here Fred Hampton, all were seeking to help us appreciate that racism is actually a tool for upholding economic deprivation. So, and when Dad wrote about militarism being part of that equation, you've got to keep a strong defense, or you're going to support a strong defense rather than invest money in education, invest money in helping people to build assets and wealth, because the design, the inherent design in all of this, since the beginning of the founding of this nation and the taking of Native Americans' land, is to rest economic and political power in the hands of a select few. And so you've got to keep people in a place, in a state of the few holding the masses of wealth and the masses holding very little wealth. When you start making critical investments in people's lives that help to build economic opportunity, economic security in a sustainable way, you're now helping people to strengthen their agency, their sense of self.
Yeah.
And that is something that this nation is not yet ready to invest in and do. And part of the justice and advocacy work ties in very closely with what you do in terms of helping people to develop agency over their finances, to think differently about how they show up with respect to themselves and their families. We have to help people understand that in the lives we've been given, economic security is freedom.
Right.
It's freedom from oppression. It's freedom from suppression.
Right.
Right? I mean, and the suppressed vote, if you will. If you have economic freedom, you get to decide who you're going to support in a campaign or not. So we have to help people understand how these systems work so that they can then develop the desire and the will to take control in the way that you are helping them to do so.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, sometimes my work is just so overwhelming. The calls we get, the needs people have, you know, people with $80,000, $90,000 in debt, people who have, you know, we talked to a young lady recently who bought a $29,000 car and financed it for 7 years. 7 years
So
of
she
financing.
will be paying more than twice that.
Her payments now, I think, are 2 months behind, so she owes more than the car cost. I mean, this is the trap we're in.
Yes.
And while I do it from a freedom perspective, that's why I call my brand DFREE, right? The focus on freedom.
Yes.
Sometimes I think the problem is so overwhelming that my commitment to freedom and justice does not come through enough. And so I've decided I need help with that.
So see,
I
to
need
your point,
partnership, you know.
right? And so I mean, and I don't know if I should this, but I'd love to partner with you, because what people look at the work I do sometimes, as you've spoken to, you've alluded to, and they're like, yeah, but we got issues in the moment,
Right.
Right? But it's like, you know, you're aware of my journey with cancer, where I had leukemia. The doctor said that chemotherapy would work, but for a certain time.
Right.
And at a certain point, chemotherapy would stop working and I would die. I needed a transplant.
Right.
I needed a new foundation for my blood and bone marrow system. Leukemia is a blood cancer. I needed a new blood and bone marrow system. What we need when it comes to financial well-being, when it comes to economic security in this nation, a lot of the work, and this is not the work that you do, you're trying to give people this sense and understanding of what's happening to develop agency. But the systems in which they're working want them to adopt kind of a Band-Aid mentality.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Well, what we need is a surgical procedure.
Right.
To actually, like in my case, they did away with the cancer.
Right.
They not only killed the cancer with chemotherapy, but I had a transplant that cured me of the cancer.
Yeah.
We need to do both and. We need to be able to apply the tourniquet, stop the bleeding, but then we got to deal with the fundamental issue that causes the bleeding.
Yeah, and we seemed to be more aware of our reality 100 years ago. It's you know, my reading of history is such that it's in the post-civil rights era that we've gotten real confused about what's happening to us and what we need to do. Therefore, I don't want to help people avoid 28% interest credit cards only. I want them to avoid it,
Right.
but I want them to understand why it's legal in America to charge people 28%.
Absolutely.
Knowing that they have low interest rates, not to mention the payday loans
That's right.
that are charging
That's
you 4,
right.
600-800% interest.
And see,
And I am so overwhelmed, literally,
right,
by triage
right.
that systems often evade my work, and I feel bad about that because
Right.
listen, I am who I
But
am.
see, the systems are it's all part of the design, right?
It is.
Because in America, what differentiates those who are economically secure from those who aren't is basic wealth,
Right,
right? Basic essential wealth.
right,
As we just talked about, $500 in the bank, right? But if you have a system that if they allow the credit cards, the banks, to take 28% interest, then they know that you are always
right.
going to be like, you're always going to be in a state of not having enough.
But Jenny,
Just-
the culture has been so contrived now that when we approved for a 28% credit card,
we get excited.
right, we celebrate. It's like they've done it.
Right.
And when oppression can feel good, you've got a deep problem.
Right. Well, see, to your point, part of your work and part of my work is we have to get people to a place and space where they realize that this is actually depriving them on the whole.
Yes.
And, like I can go out and I can work, sadly, sometimes with legislators, with policy influencers on the structural issues. But sometimes I'm hard pressed if I talk to my own community about why they need to understand these issues.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to chat with you and record it because I am desperately seeking ways to expand with integrity.
Yeah.
Because it is a both and. It's not an either or. But again, I'm confronted with these emergencies, this crisis, this issue. Our brand focuses on debt delinquencies and deficits, but also on investing and home
That's
ownership
right.
and all of those things.
The building of wealth.
But I'll tell you, it is very hard, and your work is so important to my work, and your data is so important to our messages.
And I feel the very same. I mean, this
Yeah.
is a both and approach. When we were, coming of age, you and me both, like we were taught that it's a both and. My father, when I was in law school, I mentioned law school, he was he had a pastorate, but he lectured and he preached around the country. He wrote books, and he made certain that he was going to pay for my law school because what he understood was
Right.
that was a transference of wealth
Right.
early on. If I came out of law school with significant debt, then I'd be back years, decades before I could buy a home.
Right. That's right.
So he understood, let me take care of her now. But we as a people still, if we get a little something, we're like, I'm going to hold on to it
Yeah. Yeah.
and not understand that we also have to figure out how we build wealth for the next generation.
That's right. So your dad said something. One of my favorite chapters of the Bible is Jesus washing feet, and Dr. Jones preached a sermon on the whip, the towel, and the cross.
I know it.
I love that. And in that sermon, what he said was the my words, the path to the solution to your problems is for you to really dive into solving other people's problems. You seem to have embraced that ethic because your whole life is focused on things that benefit other people. So let's wrap up with you describing how you have become the embodiment of that ethic.
Okay, now am I supposed to not cry in this moment? One of the things that my father and my mother both taught me was that you live your best life when you help others live their best lives.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you look at people who chase title, chase position, chase worldly assets. And then, they don't have to be on their deathbeds. Sometimes it happens in their 50s. They're struggling for meaning, for purpose, for value. You can do all of that, but do it for the greater good,
Yeah.
not just for self. I mentioned my journey with cancer. I remember after coming out of my journey, one day I was driving to work, and I was listening to one of my father's sermons. I do not remember the text. I don't remember the title, But when he reached that crescendo moment, he said, "Don't you know he didn't save you for your sake? God saved you for the kingdom's sake." That's it.
Yeah.
Every day we are being saved by God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But we have to remember we're not here just for self. We're not that important. Only if we're doing the work that God has purposed us to do. Do we have relevance? Do we have significance? So that's what I'm here for.
Well, you do it well, and
I'm trying.
I look forward to continued partnership
Oh,
because
I appreciate it.
you bring to not just my work, but you bring to our community an aspect of work and a level of excellence that we desperately need,
You're
especially during these times. So thank you. Jennifer
Thank you.
Jones Alston, just a star, someone that all of us should know, and I'm going to do my part to make sure that as many of us know her as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of the DFREE Wealth Lab. If you need financial help, go to our website, dfree.com/gethelp, and join the DFREE community, where we encourage each other, support each other, hold each other accountable towards reaching our financial goals.